Bubble, bubble, toil and trouble. I'm wearing another fit from Addie Bet Designs. Yes, I know it's not quite fall yet, but I'm in a witchy mood. Speaking of witches, I want to talk about the potion that is interest rates that the Fed is going to have to cook up next week at its meeting. Let's get into it. First part of our witch's brew is inflation. Now, when inflation is up, we raise interest rates to combat it. There is a lot of controversy over the practice of combating inflation with raising interest rates. I'm not here to debate that right now. It's an ongoing body of research. I'm just telling you what the Fed does. The price data that the Fed has to work with as of today is as follows. CPI increased 0.4%. CPI is just your overall consumer price indexes. Then core inflation, which is the Fed's preferred measure, went up 0.3%. So still pretty high. One of the big eye-popping numbers was shelter, in particular, in the BLS report, went up 0.4%. It had only gone up 0.2% in July, so it doubled its rate of increase. Now, there's several members of the Board of Governors, and one of them in particular, Chris Waller, really wants to be the new Fed chair. And so, of course, he's been down with interest rates to go along with Trump's demands for several months now. And one of his big things that he's been beating the drum about is how this is temporary. All of these price fluctuations regarding tariffs are temporary, which can be sort of correct, I guess, when you squint with one eye and don't really look out of the other, but it doesn't really apply to our current situation. Here's why. First, we've got a couple of tacos to still eat. Specifically Mexico and China. We still don't have an actual tariff deal with either of those. Mexico was responsible for $500 billion, $500 billion of our imports in 2024. These are our top two trading partners, and so whatever ends up being the tariff situation for those two will drastically impact the inflation tariff effects one way or another. Second is the one-time price increase rhetoric. Yes, as Jerome Powell did confirm in his Jackson Hole speech, they are anticipating that inflationary pressures from tariffs will be one time. But one time doesn't mean instantaneously today. One time means once everything has been decided and settled and everything is like known, then the price increase will happen and then probably no more will occur after that. The problem is we are still very much in the middle of that increase, and how that impacts inflation is still very much up in the air. So this idea that we are past the price shift is ridiculous, especially when we don't know whether or not SCOTUS is going to rule for or against the tariffs this fall. That brings us to the other side of our cauldron, unemployment. When unemployment is up, interest rates go down. Now, the reason we are so concerned about this right now is jobless claims have recently spiked 27,000 recently. Now remember, the Fed is primarily concerned with unemployment, not necessarily the number of jobs going down, but we do have concerns there. In August, unemployment was at 4.3%, which was a 0.2% increase from July. So now what needs to happen is Jerome Powell and his buds at the Fed have to take this shitty ingredient from inflation and this shitty ingredient from unemployment and try to come up with an interest rate. The number that's been floated over and over again is a 0.25% cut, 0.25%. I have said it before and I'll say it again. Even if Jerome Powell and the Fed decide to cut interest rates because of all of this issue right here, it is likely that that cut would be temporary. Unless we can rein in Donald Trump and his reign of tariff terror, there is no way that inflationary pressures will not continue on the prices side. Now, tariffs are absolutely having an effect on the employment rate as well, but as Jerome Powell also said in his Jackson Hole speech, the fiscal framework that the Fed is now going to be using will focus primarily on price stability. So if this starts to get wildly out of pocket, even in the next month or so, those interest rates might have to go right back up. As you all know, I am a Powell, but thank God I'm not Jerome Powell. Also, there's no relation. I get that question a lot. I would not want to be the person right now trying to take these nonsensical ingredients and create some sort of sensible fiscal policy with it. But you know what would help? If the Supreme Court doesn't stick its own uneducated, ill-informed input into this situation. So make sure you call your Democrats in Congress and tell them that they really, really need to limit the Supreme Court's jurisdiction over tariffs, taxes, and appropriations, okay? See my other videos about that. More to come, and stay tuned.